Shepherd Show. Welcome to the Lshpe Show, where something's going to happen and it could be good. I'm very excited to be here. It's Father's Day. Robert Shepherd, Bobby, that was my dad. Happy Father's Day. And we are a bunch of women performing, I guess because all the fathers are busy. It's a beautiful day here in Gulfport, Florida. For all you people out there on podcasts, feel free to sing along with this. You can get this as a podcast. I'd like to take an opportunity to say that if you value good news for 1 hour, at least every 2 weeks, please consider supporting the Lshpe Show. You can leave money in the tip jar or go to Patreon and become a supporter of good news. Share this with your friends, comment on Facebook, all that actually helps. All right, ready? Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen like we do. Why? Oh, you never know just how life is gonna go. So jump in your boat and row, row, row. Jump in your boat and row, row, row. Everybody sing. Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen like we do. Are good, or we'd really be in a mess. I mean, you know, your heart keeps beating, you keep breathing, all good most of the time. Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen like we do. Oh yeah, you gotta aim high and go for your go ahead and trust yourself. Everything writes itself. Oh yeah, well life's a stream, so go ahead now, follow your dream. Jump in your boat and row, row, row. Jump in your boat, row, row, row. Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen and it could be good. Something's gonna happen like we do it would. Ooh, I knew it. Something is gonna happen. Well, it's a beautiful day in Gulfport. There's some crows in the neighborhood. I kind of like crows. They're black and shiny. Black and shiny. I like them. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get Sunya up here of Mother Tongue and get her to share with us. Come on up to the stage, Sunya. Hey, how are you? Welcome. Good. I am so glad that you could make it today on Father's Day with the Mother Tongue. I keep saying that, but I think it's funny. Haha. It's my little sense of humor.
Yeah.
So, have you been a musician? Did you grow up a musician?
Well, I would say my dad definitely was the encouraging factor in my music journey. He played the saxophone.
Ooh.
And he was also a big fan of Elton John, so we listened to a lot of Elton John pretty much every single day and just danced for like a good 5 years at least. Same album, pretty much.
And what was your first instrument that you started actually playing?
Piano.
Piano.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, Elton John.
Yeah. Yeah. I started piano when I was just on the cusp of 8. So.
And did you go to do little performances as a kid? Were you one of those?
Yeah. I went to. I had a piano teacher, so we brought one to the church. Not the church I went to, just a church, and I had yearly piano recitals and. I played with all the older kids because I was a little better than the kids in my age. So, Yeah, I remember my first recital, I played the Beauty and the Beast song, and like halfway through, I forgot where I was at and then just started improvising. And so that's where it all started.
Yeah. And do you remember being nervous as a kid? Like stressed out about what you had to do?
I was more stressed out about things that I didn't feel confident in, like non-music related.
Oh, right. So the performance was no big deal, but maybe what were some of the stressors in your life?
Testing. Wasn't very good at testing.
Yeah.
Cooking wasn't most like normal people things, like normal life stuff. But as far as music, art, anything like kind of strange, I was pretty good at.
And when did you start performing out on your own, like outside of a piano rehearsal?
Well, I grew up in Dunedin, and so probably around the age of 14, I was taught myself guitar, and so I would go out with my guitar, and I would sit in downtown Dunedin on a bench on the Pinellas Trail and busk. And
was it profitable?
Some days,
yeah.
Some seasons, not always, but I always made a lot of good friends,
yeah.
Interesting characters.
And these days tell us the concept behind Mother Tongue.
Sure. So Mother Tongue came to me. I've always been really into improvisation. And I always felt like...
Oh, your very first concert, you had to improvise at the Beauty and the Beast, and it stuck with you.
Yeah. I feel like I can speak... I've always been good at speaking my own language, but as far as like conforming to other people's languages, it's been a little tougher, like following cooking instructions. Just didn't register. So... and also this divine feminine, I feel like that's been coming through a lot more recently in the past 5 years. And
mangoes falling off the roof, I guess.
Yeah.
That loud noise.
Yeah, and so I felt like Mother Tongue was an appropriate name because it's the language of creative expression, and I am an artist, I'm a musician, I speak in my own language in many ways. So this concept came to me because I believe in the end we're all actually speaking our own languages, and we're just trying to translate it, we get lost in translation sometimes, but we're all speaking from our own unique symbolic systems, inspired by our life experiences and our culture that we were raised in with our family. And so with this project, I encourage people to make art while I'm playing music. I usually bring little sacred geometry coloring templates I've made so that you can get creative while you're listening to instrumental music. And I even encourage people to, bring little rhythm instruments and play along and be very inclusive because, connect with that creative identity. We're all creating this reality for ourselves every day, and the more you can embrace that, the more your reality is going to align with who you are and not what someone out there expects you to look like.
Right. Well, absolutely. Okay, and this Mother Tongue, you're using looping pedals, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I have one loop pedal, which I got from my good friend Billy Mays.
Yeah. Shout out to Billy Mays. Nice job.
Yeah, it's a really cool pedal because it's a loop pedal and a delay pedal. So a delay is almost a form of looping in a way because it's an echo. So the echo, depending on how long the hallway is, can loop a lot of times.
How long a delay can you have?
I would say probably a good 15 seconds,
right.
Which is a pretty long time in delay. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll play and I'll have almost like bird calls, where I'll make the delay really long, and then when the delay comes back around, I'll harmonize with it.
Oh, wow.
So it's fun if I can coordinate myself well enough.
And then, okay, so you have a delay pedal and a looping pedal. For those that don't know, can you explain to us just a little bit what a looping pedal does?
Well, the delay and the looper are in the same thing,
okay.
And so the looping pedal basically is like a recorder, and so when I hit the button, it starts recording, and then when I hit the button again, it immediately starts replaying from the second that I started recording. And so that's usually I will loop my guitar and then build off of that. But sometimes I'll start with the drums and then build off of that too.
And how long a loop can you make?
Up to 30 minutes.
Up to 30.
Haven't done that long of a loop yet, but I am very into ambient music. So for my more ambient music series, which I imagine people like doing yoga, I could make up to a 30-minute loop, and then when the loop is done, just hit that record button and go do some yoga, chill, come back, play a little bit more.
And I really admire people that can use these looping pedals, because it seems to me that your timing has to be pretty rock solid.
Yeah, I am a drummer, so.
Right, because the thing loops at exactly the same time and you have to catch up. You know what I say about a metronome? Metronomes are great, they keep great time, but they don't listen for dawn. They don't listen.
Not all metronomes are created equal either. You know, I was spent a lot of time with drummers and metronomes, so not all of them are as good.
What do you mean? There's metronomes that don't actually metronome properly?
You know, yeah, it's just a matter of programming. They just have a different sense of timing. It's very subtle. I mean, most people wouldn't notice, but not all metronomes are created equally.
All right. What's the best metronome? Do we have a...
Yeah, I like the old school ones, that just the little like machine. Like I don't use a metronome on my phone or anything like that. Yeah. But overall, like at this point, I just use metronome in my head and trust that.
Right. Well, I'm sure you've got that. Okay. Would you like to do a piece for us? Do we call them songs or pieces or compositions? What do we call them?
Ooh. Yeah, let's call it an experience.
Okay, we are about to have the mother tongue experience. Okay, I'm going to let you go ahead. Okay. I'm going to get out of your way here, and let's see how you go.
All righty.
Here we go. All right, you have an electric guitar?
That's right. I do. All right. You know, actually, to get warmed up, this is my favorite thing to do. I just like to start with some simple drums and flute, because that's like getting in touch with the primal, you know. And it's also just a good way for me to feel like I can loosen up and kind of set the vibe.
There it is, coming back in on the loop.
Yeah. And let me know if my volume, you know.
I feel like it's very relaxing. Do you find it stressful to have to keep up with it, or are you just relaxed?
It's exhilarating.
Oh, fun. I love that
Yeah,
word.
it gets my heart beating, and just trusting in my rhythm. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, I think as a drummer, I'm always tapping on things, so like that inner rhythm is pretty established, and so at this point, I just kind of, it's just like breathing, I just trust that I'm going to continue doing it and have rhythm.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now, what other things do you do in your life?
Well, I'm an artist, so I love to paint, and that's like another meditation for me. With music, it's like more about, cultivating that energy in the moment, and with painting, it's still like very present meditation, but it also kind of like ties in more of the future, because I'm like pulling in this vision that I feel like I'm seeing from out there far away. And so while the music, I'm very much in the present moment, I'm not anticipating or thinking, what am I going to do next? With the painting, I am. And so usually what I do is I'll start with a sacred geometry, usually like the flower of life grid, matrix kind of thing. Instead of a linear grid, it's made of circles. And so I'll start with that, and then I'll usually start from the center point and just let it blossom as I see whatever I see in the matrix. I start painting it, and it just kind of unfolds. It's sometimes.
You brought one of your paintings with us.
I did.
Let's show this painting to
Yeah,
our studio audience here.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh my goodness.
It's
Okay,
a big one.
This is a beautiful painting,
Yeah.
and it sort of has a face going on. And you said you painted it at the Orange Blossom Jamboree.
Yeah.
So there's our orange, and this flower of life. The flower of life is those interlocking flowers, circles that you can do. When you sit at a table and you've got that glass of beer and it's condensating, and you pick it up and there's a ring, and then you move it and you put it over, and you can make the flower of life right there on your.
True.
That's what you can do when you're drinking beer.
It's that natural.
And you're using all sorts of colors here, bright colors.
I've always been a bright color person. I've been inspired by like a lot of Mayan, like South American painting, and that, that just that solid, bright, vivid colors.
And I like the way you're combining sort of a face shape. It's not realistic, but it's certainly recognizable as a face with ears and cute little orange earrings. Do your paintings always have something like that recognizable in them, or sometimes completely abstract?
Well,
lay this over here for a minute.
Sure, yeah. A lot of times, it's a little different every time. For a while, I was focusing more on mandalas and just circular creations. And I do really love eyes. That was like one of the first things I started drawing obsessively. So
mangoes are falling out of the trees. We can eat that one.
Yeah.
Excuse me for interrupting.
You're
I
good.
just was so excited when I saw one that looked right hit the ground.
I love me some mangoes.
Yeah, well, that one's for you. It fell during your talk, so it's clearly yours. We'll get that one to you.
Okay. Yeah. Speaker of the mangoes.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but I love drawing eyes, and the eyes of mandala as well. But actually, with that painting, I was inspired by, I painted that on the day of Buddha's birthday, Siddhartha Gautama, which happens during OBJ. And I was meditating on that, and I love to play singing bowls, and so I was playing my singing bowls and meditating under a tree and just trying to connect with that, Buddha nature. And I thought about it, and I was like, Buddha is always seen as like this man, he was a man, but it was like, what's the next Buddha? We're all Buddhas. And so I was like, we need some more like female Buddha paintings, and so I was like, I'm gonna paint a female Buddha. And then as I was painting it, of course I started thinking about mother tongue and all this music going on, and I was like, I'm gonna paint it with her tongue out, because it's like, that's part of that divine wild woman feminine, where it's like, I just imagine like Kali, she's a Hindu goddess, and she's known as like the compassionate mother, the most compassionate, but she's also commonly seen like stepping on someone with like a bloody sword, and it's like wild and crazy because she's like so devastated by, how she's been disrespected, and so it's like she's so compassionate, but like when you cross her boundary, which is like a very reasonable boundary, she just goes crazy. It's like that wild woman. It's like, it's just compassion. It's just another spectrum of compassion.
What I think is interesting in the 21st century is we can mix up the Buddha and Kali in the same, like we all take different bits of tradition because, well, you weren't raised Buddhist, I don't presume.
No, Catholic.
Catholic, see? and what's your favorite part about the Catholic religion?
I always did it's a love-hate thing with the rituals, like I always loved the incense, but I wasn't such a big fan of the kneeling and then the standing and then the sitting and then the kneeling again, and so it's like I did really enjoy the little snack, it was always nice.
My favorite part of church was the snack. Well, yeah, that's why I go on the art tours. When they open the art galleries, it's like the snack tour.
Yes.
All right. Well, Sunya, thank you for talking to me, and we're going to get you back up here in a little while to talk to us some more and maybe do another piece for us a little later. That was just so fabulous. Oh, yay. All right. The next person we're going to get up here is Emily Bell. Emily Bell is from the Florida Invasive Species Partnership. And I know, yay, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. And Emily was kind enough to draw for us today and brought her child with us who did some extra drawings down here at the bottom. Yeah. But they've gone off on a this is the library, you must go take a walk.
They're on an adventure.
They're on an adventure. Mm-hmm. Where are you from, Emily?
I am a born and raised Floridian. Third
Oh,
or
can I
fourth
touch you?
generation on my dad's side, and was raised on Amelia Island up in Northeast Florida. So essentially, we're an extension of the barrier islands that come down off of Georgia. So we're looking across the water at Cumberland Island, near Jacksonville. People know Jacksonville, so we're just north of that.
And was that like a big town or a small town type thing?
Small town. When I was growing up, it has grown. We got a Ritz-Carlton in the 90s, and that really picked up our exposure to, we became kind of a destination at that point. And so we get a lot of tourism, which is great. It's a part of our industry, but still small town feel, which I love. Yeah. I moved around a little bit, but I'm back there raising my kid, and it's nice to kind of raise him where I grew up and still have that small town community and feel.
And were you allowed to, run around all day?
Pretty much. We rode our bikes around the islands.
And
pretty much had.
Do you think that your child will be able to do the same thing, or are you too worried about it?
Oh, I do. No, our neighborhood especially, there's already just all these children who are just always out at each other's houses, and our neighbor across the street, there's just always 10 boys over there, and then they go somewhere else and come back, and so it's a special place in that way. For sure.
And how long have you been interested in this concept of invasive species?
Goodness, so I kind of stumbled into it. I am a social scientist by training, so I work in the biological sciences field with a lot of super smart researchers, and sociologists are that as well, but I'm bringing that to the environmental field, and I was always really interested in how people interacted with nature. I always grew up around nature. My parents were very outdoorsy. Both of my parents are foresters, so we grew up in the woods and on the beach. And so when I came out of college, I didn't really know, what am I do? I know I want to work in the environmental field. So I started with an internship with the Nature Conservancy and was working on a project.
Where?
Up in Northeast Florida.
Okay, yeah.
And I was working on a project where we were developing a survey for land managers to get a handle on what the invasive species they were dealing with were, and help them prioritize the species that they may need to target as early invaders that they could get a handle on before they became too crazy and then became much harder to control. So that was really my first introduction to invasive species at that time. And it really, I kind of knew. I took a couple classes in college, but it was really, and from there it just kind of blossomed into, that's basically what I've been working on for about 10 or 12 years now in different capacities with different agencies. collaborations to deal with the issue of invasive species.
And so invasive species, is that just plants from somewhere else or just plants from somewhere else that spread crazily?
So it's so complex, and I'm trying, if anything, when I talk about this, I told them, do you have a month? Can we just spend some time here? But I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible. So we typically recognize the definition that was set by the National Invasive Species Council under the Clinton administration in the 90s as an invasive species being a species from somewhere else, not native to its area, that causes environmental, economic, or human health issues. So it's not just plants. Plants are a huge, very recognizable one that we know about, but it's also animals. Most of us are familiar with pythons in the Everglades, black and white Argentine tegus now in South Florida. It's also diseases. Diseases spread from place to place that can impact people or animals. It's also the red bay ambrosia beetle is a great example of the complexity of the issue. So a tiny beetle about the size of a pinhead came in from Asia in packing material into a port in the southeast. I want to say Savannah, but up in that area. It was in the crate material in the wood because they're a wood-boring beetle. It got out into the environment and it uses our native red bay trees as a host. So it goes into the tree and it leaves this fungus, it lays its eggs, and then it rears its young on that fungus. Now in its native range in Asia, it can live with those trees that serve as a host for it. But here our trees were not used to it, and it resulted in a mass die-off of one of our most important forest trees throughout the southeast, which is the red bay tree. It's also potentially threatening to the avocado industry in Florida because that tree is in the same genus. So it's this whole complex interplay of how things are moving globally has really drastically increased the issue of invasive species. And that's just one example that's kind of easy to talk about as far as you can follow the trail and see how it's not even really the beetle, but it's the fungus, but because the beetle ends, it's a whole thing. And so we see those examples play out over and over in different places all over the world.
And with this partnership, do you have some success stories? I mean, it seems like once something's out there, it's really hard to bring it under control.
To set the stage a little bit, the Florida Invasive Species Partnership is a collaboration of all the different major players and organizations that have a stake in invasive species. So FWC, the Fish and Wildlife Commission, DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, the Nature Conservancy, all our big NGOs, private landowners included, who came together in the 90s as well. Governor Jeb Bush in Florida requested that the Department of Environmental Protection create an invasive species plan for the state, and that they work with all the other agencies to do that. And so during that process, there were these different subcommittees that were created. And one of them was this private lands working group, which was created because invasive species know no boundaries, as we like to say. But we do, obviously. We're very serious about our political and our private land boundaries, right? So we recognize that, one, not only do all the agencies who have public land management responsibilities need to work together, because you have a DEP managed land right next to an FWC managed land, and they need to be communicating about what species are moving and how. But Florida is also 60% privately owned. We have a lot of large ranches. We have a lot of large agricultural areas. We have private homes. And so we had to find ways to bridge the gaps with those folks as well. So that committee was set up. Unfortunately, the work that was spearheaded by the state kind of drizzled out. It wasn't an exciting enough topic, which we struggle with in invasive species, getting that word out and getting people to care. And so, but this group that had come together said, we've got some traction, we're doing important work, we want to continue. So they kind of rebranded as the Florida Invasive Species Partnership and continued that work. So the two main things that we've tried to do on the state level, again, bringing in that communication and collaboration with each other as partners. And then we also work to set up these regional groups called Cooperative Invasive Species Management Areas. So for the Florida Invasive Species Partnership, you'll hear me say FISP. That's kind of what we call ourselves. And for those regionals, you'll hear me say SISMAs. So we call them SISMAs. And there were already some early adopters. This is an idea that's been used across the country, which is essentially just that this same kind of makeup of the state partnership, but on a regional level. These people are coming together to communicate and work on invasive species issues. And whereas the state partnership, we're more the planner people. It's the people who are in charge of programs that have funding or that do different types of work. The regional partnerships are really the folks working on the ground. So those are the land managers that are out in the thick of it every day, seeing what's going on. And they're communicating on that more regional level to work together to tackle the issue. And so I guess a few of our biggest success stories, when this effort started, I think there were maybe 3 SISMAs in the state that were early adopters. So the Everglades SISMA is a big one. They've got a lot of resources. It's the Everglades. There's a lot of different work supported down there. So they're a model. They're still our biggest leading active SISMA. And then there was an early adopter up in Northeast Florida. But as of today, about 10 years later, the entire state is covered. There's 16 SISMAs in the state. So no matter where you are, there is a group of folks that are committed to working together. Varying degrees of capacity, this is all voluntary. So this is all people from agencies and organizations who recognize that this is such an important issue that we have to work together. So FISP itself, the folks who are in that room are there because they know that this is an issue we have to tackle together, and the same thing for the SISMAs on the regional level. And then for me, one of the coolest projects that the SISMAs do when they have the capacity and are able is engage with neighborhoods and communities that reach out and say, we're concerned about this, what can we do? And there's always different ways that we can work with private landowners, and it's hard because we wish we had more. I wish every time a private landowner wrote me and said, I have this tree in my yard, I wish I could show up at your house and cut it down for you. I do. Unfortunately, I can't. We don't have, but what we do have, because of these regional groups that work together, we have done some really cool projects with, great example, one that I was involved with years ago. When I lived in St. Johns County, I worked around St. Augustine in that area for DEP and NOAA. We worked with a condo association in St. Augustine. Their dunes had been taken over by Brazilian pepper. Down here in South Florida, you guys are like so much more just covered with it. Up there, it's still kind of in a manageable stage. And so this area that was just covered with it wasn't necessarily the same story on both sides. So we could go in, we could take that out, and really make a big impact with that plant there. And so with our working group, our regional SISMA, we were able to put together a team of people who had the resources, the tools that you need to go in and remove it. The association involved with the condos brought us in a dumpster for the plant material, and they are responsible for the regrowth, making sure that the pepper doesn't come back. And so we were able to work with them to basically restore that dune system. And a lot of other SISMAs are doing similar projects. They also really are there for outreach. They're at events. They're there to spread the word and help people get engaged with this issue. And then again, just that networking opportunity for those folks working on the ground is a huge part of what SISMAs do.
It's interesting because Brazilian pepper, my neighbor has a Brazilian pepper, and the
Right.
Brazilian
Right
pepper,
there.
we're sitting
Yes.
looking at one. And the thing about the Brazilian peppers is that they feed the bees. And so there's the issue of you have a big beautiful tree, or you have a Brazilian pepper that the bees just really love, and you come and you remove the invasive species. How if it's the only thing left for the bees, like at what point does an invasive species become, and I guess this is the trick of your profession.
So I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about why this is such a big problem. And that is because we now know, and I think that a lot of us have intuitively known this for a while, but now and more we're getting the research to back up the fact that invasive species behind habitat loss and disturbing ecosystems are really the number 2 cause of extinctions. So extinctions are forever. The biggest thing that invasive species do environmentally, and again, we can get into the economics. There's a whole, with agriculture, there's a whole issue there. We can get into the human health because there's a whole other issue there. I primarily work on the conservation side, so that's what I can talk the most about. But the reason invasive species are so bad is because they are species that when they come into an environment that is new to them, they have no natural predators, they can reproduce quickly. They can grow, if we're talking about plants, they can grow fast, they create a bunch of seeds, and they can out-compete the natives around them. And so they create a monoculture. So you have what was once a very biodiverse, healthy forest with all your native pollinators that had the native plants that supported them. And then what you get is a forest of 1 to 4 plants that can support different stages of some of the native wildlife, but not all of their stages of life. And so your biodiversity goes way down really quickly. Now, so to give you an example, one of the reasons it's so bad in Florida, and we are second to the state of Hawaii in the United States as being the most impacted by invasive species, and our environment being impacted that way. And there's a couple reasons for that. We are a hub of agriculture, horticulture, and the pet trade because of our climate. And I want to be clear, we work with these industries. They're important to the state. But by the nature of where we are, they're great places to have those industries, and they're important. But we also have this very welcoming climate. So when things do escape, it's like, stretch out, I'm going to breathe,
warm.
I'm going to take advantage of this warm air in this rainy season, and I'm just going to grow. And so with the horticulture industry, for example, only about 8 to 15% of what they bring in, and we bring in tons of different kinds of species of plants, I mean just thousands upon thousands, only about 8 to 15% of those become these problematic invaders.
That's
so
a lot.
The big part for us, well, and we have to recognize too, the science has come so far. So there's a lot of things we introduced a long time ago before we even knew. Brazilian pepper is a good example of that. Before we had this idea that could be a problem. So one of the big ways we work with industry is how can we prevent the next big invader? Let's look at what you want to bring in. And can we agree that if this thing looks like, hey, this has the potential once it gets here to really spread, maybe we don't bring that in. Maybe we bring something else that doesn't have these traits. And so those assessments of things now coming in is one of the big ways we really want to work with industry. But to kind of bring this all around to your question, which is really important, and we hear that about Brazilian pepper, we also hear that about Chinese tallow. Less of an issue down here, that's one that's coming down from the north, but a tree, again, that's become very abundant, and the bees really love it. If we take those out, it's really important to have the commitment and resources to try and put the natives back in, because that's what's going to support your biodiverse set of pollinators and birds and everything, not just a honeybee or not just a few insects or types of birds or birds in one stage of life. So it is hard, especially because they're so ubiquitous, and so people can see them and say, okay, well, these bees like them, so it must be good. But it's just the story is more complex than that. And so one of the things we talked about, one thing everybody can do is look around their own property and see what they have and kind of take ownership of that and say, how can I remove some of these invasives? And then bonus points if you seek out natives to replace them with, because there's a number of reasons that's beneficial. But one of the best tools we have against invasives is healthy ecosystems. A healthy ecosystem is more resilient and can fend off invasive species better. We have so much fragmentation, we have so much disturbance, that really helps species from other places thrive as well. So when we create these little pockets of native havens in our own landscapes, that does a lot for biodiversity, that does a lot to support not just your yard, but maybe the natural area next door. So I hope that answered your question. Like I said, do you have a month?
I know. There's so much to talk about.
Now.
I know that down at Port DeSoto they had great big Australian pines.
Yeah.
And they were the only shade trees on the beach. And
big
they
issue down here.
cut them all down.
Yep.
And which angered a lot of people,
Yes.
but I guess it's a good thing. And
it's really hard, and that's one of the things, this outreach and talking to people, and that's why I'm so thankful that you guys invited me here today is, the casuarina, the Australian pine, is a bad one, and it changes the whole structure of that habitat, and so it can disturb sea turtle nesting, it can disturb, further south in Florida, it can disturb the critically endangered American crocodile nesting habitat. It also, so one of the real sciencey terms I usually talk about, especially pertaining to plants when I talk to people, is allelopathy. So that's the most sciencey term you'll hear me use, and all that means is plants have chemical interactions with each other in the ground, through their leaves that fall, and in a system that has evolved together, these plants have evolved together, those chemical interactions balance out. So there may be a native plant that suppresses growth of another plant, but they can all kind of even out. When we have a non-native, again, with those new features that its chemical interactions aren't something any of our natives are used to, so it can just suppress everything, Australian pine, when its needles fall, creates this mat. And I'm sure you've seen that at those beach areas, this mat of those they're actually not needles, they're very reduced leaves. When they fall, suppresses the growth of almost anything else. The only things I've seen growing in those mats are Brazilian pepper and another non-native called kalanchoe.
Well, that's great. We're going to have a whole
So they support, so disturbed invasive species tend to support, or invasive systems tend to support more invasives. It kind of becomes this compounding effect, right? And the opposite is true when we start putting natives back in. It starts to kind of restore and bring that balance back. So there's a lot of reasons it's important, and we understand, it can be very hard getting that message to the public and trying to balance those needs of the public user and wanting to recreate, and then, maybe taking away something, but for the greater good.
And so
we try to
do you
share
feel
that
like
message.
that we're making any progress? I mean, is it...
Okay, so this is a good news show.
Okay,
Right, that was something I felt
good news.
when I was reading about this.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is going to be hard because we specialize in bad news, unfortunately, a lot of times, so it can be hard for us. I think in a number of ways I want to say yes. I mean, definitely awareness is up. People are way more aware than they ever have been. I think the pythons in the Everglades has been a huge... I work with, I know a guy in South Florida, he's a herpetologist, and he's like, man, if you had ever told me this is something we'd be dealing with, I would have told you you're crazy. And so even in the conservation community, I mean, just some of those issues have really raised the level of awareness. And then I think, too, there's this counter trend, and I'm curious, I don't know if it's just because I'm in the kind of flow of information for this type of thing, but there's this counter trend to the need to have the manicured lawn everywhere, right? There's an upswell of stories about let your lawn go wild, and it can still be in a reasonable way, if you want to have that look. But there's this upswelling of recognition of native species and biodiversity, I think, that is coming up more and more now. And I think as far as what everyone can do to help us, that's a huge one. It's just, can you remove the invasives from your own area, property that you can control, and do some restoration work? It's awesome. So, and then I think the good news is that there's so many ways people can help us.
Give us we got a few seconds here.
Sorry.
So, no, don't be sorry. It's so amazing how much, and there's a million questions that we could ask, and there's so many shades of gray in this particular issue.
Yeah.
But taking care of your own yard,
so I've talked a lot about that.
Number one.
Mm-hmm.
What else can we do?
So help us spread the message and not the pest. That's one big one I say. So talk to your neighbors. If you get your community involved, there's a lot of cool programs out there through Florida Wildlife Federation, some of those different, Audubon I think has one, Fish and Wildlife Service I think has one, where you can get your neighborhood certified as a wildlife habitat, and part of those programs is always removing invasive species. So get your we're working with a woman in Gainesville who's really excited about knocking on her neighbor's door and saying, hey, I'm working on this on my property, can we work together? And
so, that's not just in the state of Florida.
Community building. Oh, not
that
at all.
is anywhere in the country,
everywhere.
and probably the world.
And then, talk to your neighbors, educate yourself. There's a great resource, the Florida Exotic Pest Plant Council, just talking about plants, puts together a list of a couple hundred plant species. That's a great place to start. Just make sure those aren't in your yard and that you don't buy them from nurseries.
Okay, so we're going to have to take a little tour. Okay. We're going to take a tour around my yard after the show.
Oh,
See if I
yeah.
have any about some of the things I've planted food-wise. Thank you so much.
And then, can I say two more?
Yes.
So, there's a really cool tool called Ed's Maps. So if you want to get into citizen science, help us, tell us where these things are. There's an app you can download for your smartphone. You can also do it online. It's called Ed Maps.
Ed Maps.
And you can find it through our website, floridainvasives.org. And you can report invasives anywhere you are from your phone. And that's really great for us, especially down here in South Florida. FWC, if you see a black and white Argentine tegu or a really weird lizard, and you can grab a picture of it and plug it in there, that's a great way to make sure that we know that, okay, maybe this is here. So report things through that, get involved. You can sign in, you have your own account, you can look at all the things you've put in there, and advocate, and just, the local cooperative invasive species management areas and your local IFAS extension are great resources. If you want to know what's in your yard, or you just want to find out what's going on in your area and why it's happening. You talk about the casuarina. Talk to the people in the agencies doing the work, because they're there because they care about the environment.
Yeah.
And so, have a conversation with them. Realize that they're just people too who are doing a labor of love, and maybe if you understand a little more about why that work is happening.
And you could volunteer too.
And you can
Yay!
volunteer.
Oh, thank you.
We have tagged your website, your
Thank
Facebook
you.
page,
Yeah, so we're on
people can
Facebook
find information there.
and go
Okay.
to our website, and there's a lot of information.
Gosh,
there.
Emily, thank you
you.
so much. I so
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
I
Yay,
appreciate
thank
it
you
too.
so much for coming and sharing with us.
Thank you.
Here we are, and our friend Trina is not behind the board today. Today we have Brenda. Brenda, say hello to the world. Hello, world. This is Brenda, and we thank you. Trina's not here, but she's always wanted to hear this song, and because it's Father's Day, I'm going to sing this song, and it's called "I Don't Need a Man," and the premise behind the song is, like I'm doing pretty well. I've got, my life is going good. I got a little bit of money in a car, and I'm dressing nice and things like that. And people are like, oh, you should meet my brother, my deadbeat jailbird brother that's laying on my mama's couch. Yeah, you're doing good. I think you need to meet George. And I'm like, just because I don't have a problem doesn't mean I need your man, So I'm singing this one for Trina on Father's Day. Just cause I ain't got problems don't mean I need a man. Living pretty fabulous just the way I am. I don't have a cat and I don't need a dog. A basement full of his kids living like hogs. That's right, I don't need a man. I don't need a man. I got my head in the stars and my feet in the sand. I'm living like a queen off the land. Reality party on your TV screen. Woo, left wing, right wing, talking about things. I'm over here wearing butterfly wings. Well, that's right, I don't need a man. Just cause I ain't got problems don't mean I need a man. Things are pretty fabulous just the way I am. I don't have a cat and I don't need a dog. A basement full of his kids living like hogs. That's right, I don't need a man. Well, I got a bike and a car, but I can walk to town because it's not that far. My community's rocking with awesome bands. Heck, we own in a circle, hand in hand. Got brothers and sisters giving out love. We got each other, oh, I got love. That's right, I don't need a man. Just cause we ain't got problems don't mean we need a man. Things are pretty fabulous just the way I am. I don't have a cat and I don't want a dog or a basement full of kids living like hogs. That's right, I don't need a man. Oh my goodness. Sunya, can you come back up? We have about 10 minutes left in the show. Emily, I want to give you this gift. Emily, it's one of my albums, and I'm really glad that you came and spoke with us, and you take that home and listen to some good news.
Hey.
Sunya, come on up here. Sunya, I'm going to give you have a mango coming to you that fell off the tree, but I'm also going to give you a copy of my album because I appreciate your time.
Oh,
And
I'm so grateful.
yay.
I love your style too, I'm a big fan of like Woody Guthrie and stuff. My family's all from West Virginia, so I'm actually gonna go visit them soon.
Oh, don't
So I'll bring this CD up there
Okay,
and we'll
it's
share
good.
it with the fam.
It's good listening. Lots of lyrically driven. Your music is more instrumental, whereas mine is really lyrically driven. And
Yeah,
it's so interesting how.
a dynamic. When I'm feeling talkative, sometimes I'll do a little poetry on top of it, but just
Do you
depends
write
on how I feel.
poems? Like, do you write down poems, or do you just ad lib your poems?
I like to write them. Yeah, I have a memory problem.
Oh.
But the whole improv thing, like not a good memory.
Oh, yeah, but if you can improv, no one needs to know.
Yeah, if I did remember, I wouldn't know I was remembering. It would just.
The human brain is an amazing thing. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, before we go any further, I've forgotten we have one thing we need to do. We had a guest. This is a tradition around here. Occasionally a guest does not arrive, so we just unceremoniously cross them off the list. There we go. That's as aggressive as we get about the whole situation. Okay, carry on.
Yes.
You go out and gig, right? Do you do gigs as mother tongue, or?
Yeah, I've kind of explored. It's been a journey with mother tongue because, originally I took a more traditional approach. For a long time I played in like a jazz duo, and so, we learned cover songs and we played in bars, and it was, there was a level of improv, but there was also, people knew what they were getting. And with mother tongue, it's a little bit more experimental, and I've also just haven't had a strong desire to play in alcoholic bars any longer.
No, but you said something about doing some yoga. When I was listening, that seems like it would be great for a yoga class to just have this music being made right there.
Exactly. So
not that I go to yoga class, but if I did, I'd want your music in the background. So maybe you could be hired to do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm working on for the fall. This summer I'm spending more time just kind of taking a break from the live gigs for a little while. I was playing at Black Crow and just a couple of places around town, but I'm taking a little break to focus on, actually, I'd like to start a show of my own. I'm very inspired by
do
it.
it. Please do.
So I'm working on coordinating that and just honing my sound, writing some more songs, like backbones, to improvise on. And I should be playing a show here at my place of work, Sunya.
Sunitra, you're going to play at Sunitra?
Yeah. After I get back from my trip from West Virginia, we're going to organize something. So that's a great place. Just a chill vibe, Moroccan theme place. I love it. So that kind of stuff, where I'll bring art supplies and I'll improv for a couple hours. I love to invite my musician friends to come in, sit in with me. So
You're very flexible, and often you play with other people, little fluting, jump up on. I've seen you play with SD and Danny J and some other people, so that's always.
Yeah, I'm always happy to
look,
just.
It's raining.
Yes, it is.
There it is. It's raining, but we're undercover. So beautiful.
Yeah.
We like this.
Yeah, I'm always happy to.
Will you do another number for us?
Okay.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left in our show, so if you'll give us about 4.5 minutes, and then we can say goodbye after that, or.
Okie dokie.
Yay! Okay, now she got a pretty guitar out. That's
Yeah.
pretty lovely.
Gonna bust it out.
You have the raindrops too. That's the lovely backdrop of the rain.
hollowed out by a woodpecker.
That is my spirit animal.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, the woodpecker. Like
That is hilarious because I couldn't figure out what was going on, and finally I saw the whole woodpecker family up there. He sticks his a little mouthy in there.
Oh
So
my gosh.
this is for you, but it's not very yummy because we'll get you a better one. But interesting that you're
Symbolically yummy.
symbolically yummy. I want to thank you so much for being here on the show. Emily, thank you for coming. Thank you for being at the Laura Shepherd Show.
Thank you to the live audience. If you want to support our show, you can leave money in the tip jar. You can walk up to me on the street and hand me $1. You can go to Patreon and become a regular pledger and supporter. And you can tune in. The next show is going to be an away show. We're doing it in Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Ooh.
So I don't know. There's invasive species up there too. Not my first view. Everywhere. Okay. Yeah. Give us a little tinkle and goodbye.